Tucker Carlson is back with another propaganda screed against Ukraine. He's evidently fuming after the recent chaos inside of Russia. Back in August, he gleefully told us, by any reality-based measure, Vladimir Putin is not losing the war in Ukraine, he is winning the war in Ukraine.
By any actual reality-based measure, Vladimir Putin is not losing the war in Ukraine. He is winning the war in Ukraine.
This statement is becoming increasingly hard to justify considering a former hot dog salesman by the name of Yevgeny Prigozhin recently struck panic into the heart of the Russian state security apparatus by seizing a major city of over 1 million people in just a few hours last Saturday. What a day. Russian oligarchs and propagandists rushed to their private jets in terror as Putin's former caterer sent armoured columns filled with ex-convicts streaming towards the capital like some demented Bane cosplayer. It must have been a painful and horrible weekend of anxiety and tension for Tucker to be so invested in Russian victory for so long, only to then watch on in horror as a bunch of terrorists with guns brought the Russian state to its knees. I mean, talk about an empire in decline. Tucker obviously felt compelled to respond, so here's my response to his lies, his exaggerations, and his falsehoods. I'll be going through his video line by line. But firstly, I want to quickly discuss Tucker's priorities. He likes to feign as some kind of anti-war activist, a disinterested observer simply appalled by the loss of so many young lives in Ukraine. So many innocent young people have been killed, he tells us.
So many innocent young people have been killed. So many hundreds of billions of dollars have been wasted.
But let us note Tucker came out with this new propaganda screed against Ukraine on the very same day Russia bombed a pizzeria in Kramatorsk, killing at least 12 civilians, including 4 children. This is very important because Tucker seems to feel no outrage or sense of injustice about this bombing, or indeed any Russian atrocity in Ukraine. This is a man who loves to rile himself up, to express righteous indignation and fury at the corruption and the cruelty of the Biden administration and the Zelensky regime. But Tucker cannot find it within himself to feel a sense of outrage at Russia razing Ukrainian cities to the ground. He can't find it within himself to feel anger at the systematic rape of Ukrainian women and children by Russian soldiers, the systematic castration of Ukrainian prisoners of war by Russian troops. He feels nothing when it comes to Russia blowing up Ukrainian dams, flooding tens of thousands, shelling the rescuers. Yeah. No, for Tucker Carlson, he reserves his righteous fury only for those being bombed, tortured, and killed, because they had the temerity to challenge Tucker Carlson's worldview, which demands a Russian victory at any cost. For Tucker, Russia is the country that defends tradition. After all, Putin legalized wife bashing. He sets thugs on gay people and kills liberal journalists. Never mind the fact that a good 1/3 of Russians don't even have indoor plumbing and sewerage in one of the wealthiest countries in the world in terms of natural resources. Never mind the naked corruption of the Russian elites who day after day steal from their own people and loot the state and its resources to line their own pockets. Russia must win because Tucker considers Russia a bulwark against wokeness. So when Russia fails to take Kiev in 3 days and faces military disaster after military disaster on the battlefield in Ukraine, Tucker Carlson cannot help but hate the Ukrainians. Just like the frustrated Russian conscript who react to their failure in Ukraine by lashing out against innocent civilians with rape and castration, Tucker focuses his hatred and ire on the victims. They've sinned against Tucker's worldview by refusing to simply roll over and die, by refusing to accept the castration of their brothers and the rape of their sisters, refusing to accept their own utter annihilation. They've sinned against Tucker's worldview by fighting back. How dare they, as he likes to say. How dare a free people band together in the face of overwhelming odds and enormous hardship to fight off an attempt to enslave their entire people. For Tucker Carlson, this is the principal sin of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian nation. The victims of this war sinned against the natural order of things when they refused to conform to that terrible ancient creed: the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. This is why he smears the Ukrainian people and their democratically elected government by attempting to accuse them of the very crimes the Russian state is guilty of. He speaks of oligarchs forcing Biden to go to war with Russia without a hint of irony, as though Russia is not run by a corrupt class of bandits and oligarchs orbiting around the Kremlin. After all, the events of the past weekend where Prigozhin shook the Russian state to its very core were only possible because Putin gifted a former hot dog salesman a private army. I don't know about you, but I don't see Guy Fieri currently marching on the White House from Mexico with an army of bloodthirsty criminals previously pardoned by Biden. Ultimately, Tucker's willingness to lie and deceitfully twist the debate to present Russia as the true victim of the war is breathtaking. It was Russia that launched this insane and brutal war of conquest with an unprovoked invasion that people like Tucker spent months insisting would never happen. But watching Tucker, you could be forgiven for thinking that it was actually Russia that was the country being invaded. Tucker's trick is to never ascribe any agency whatsoever to Moscow. On his show, it is always we who are waging this, the most pointless war of all.
Honestly, there's got to be a better reason for waging this, the most pointless war of all.
He mutters of dark plots involving illicit US biolabs in Ukraine.
We're doing it so our government can continue to lie about its illicit biolabs in Eastern Europe?
referencing a borderline schizophrenic Russian conspiracy theory about American bioweapons targeting Russian DNA. The cynicism here is just breathtaking. Tucker plays another trick on his audience by presenting facts completely devoid of all their context, so as to demonize the Ukrainians. He tells his viewers that Zelensky has unilaterally suspended future elections in Ukraine so as to establish a dictatorship. Quote, "We regret to tell you we have a problem," he says. "It looks like they're not going to be able to vote in Kiev anymore. And no, for once, it's not Putin's fault."
It looks like they're not going to be able to vote in Kiev anymore. And no, for once, it's not Putin's fault. Democracy in Ukraine seems to be suspended by the world's foremost democracy advocate himself, Field Marshal Zelensky.
Tucker neglects to let on the simple matter of the Ukrainian constitution, which outright prohibits holding elections during a period of martial law. Even if Zelensky wanted to, he could not hold elections right now as per the Ukrainian constitution. I'm certain Tucker would have denounced any early wartime election in Ukraine anyway as an illicit power grab on the part of Zelensky, considering tens of millions of Ukrainians have been displaced from their homes and millions still live abroad as refugees. I mean, this is a guy who views mail-in votes as an existential threat to democracy. All these millions of Ukrainian refugees would never be allowed to vote in his preferred world anyway. Ultimately, what Tucker fails to tell his audience is that Ukraine is only under martial law right now because Putin and Russia launched a completely unprovoked invasion and war of aggression designed to destroy the Ukrainian government and place Ukraine under Russian colonial rule. Everywhere Russian forces went in the initial days of the invasion, they carried kill lists, executing civic leaders who refused to cross over to their side. Tucker neglects to mention the small matter of the invasion, the war, the kill lists. See, if you believe Tucker, democracy in Ukraine is not threatened by a foreign invading force executing democratically elected Ukrainian leaders. No, the real threat comes from Field Marshal Zelensky, Tucker's preferred slur against Ukraine's democratically elected president, who polls at an approval rating of some 80 to 90%. Of course, if Tucker cared so much for Ukrainian democracy, he could have opposed the Russian invasion, opposed the targeted execution campaign waged by Russian soldiers in occupied Ukrainian territory. He could right now call for Russian soldiers to end their invasion of Ukraine today and withdraw across the border so the Ukrainian government can lift martial law and hold elections. But for some special ill-defined reason, Tucker doesn't do this. Why might that be? He goes on to say that the suspension of elections in Ukraine blows up the rationale for supporting Zelensky's side in the war.
So we can't possibly continue to support Zelensky, that guy, after he said that, can we? Because in a clip less than 30 seconds long, he just blew up our entire rationale for supporting his side in the war. So we can't support him. Oh, of course we can. And we will.
So now you can begin to understand the twisted logic at work here. All Russia has to do to ensure victory in its war of conquest over Ukraine is make it utterly impossible to hold elections in Ukraine. This is fairly straightforward. Russia just has to continue doing what it is already doing. Keep launching the terror nighttime bombing raids against Ukrainian cities night after night. Then the West, according to Tucker, must ipso facto cut off support to Ukraine on the grounds that it is no longer a real democracy. Russia gets its way, and it gets to roll into Kiev and finally get to work on those kill lists. Brilliant. Thank you, Tucker. The logic of a rapist who holds a knife to a victim's throat and promises to kill them should they try fight back. Tucker defends the rapist. This is Tucker Carlson's dream for Ukraine's future. I mean, Tucker lets the mask slip a bit here. He complains that wars for democracy always end up in the destruction of democracy. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War, he reminds us. Does Tucker therefore imply that the war against the Confederacy should not have been waged? That the odious institution of slavery should have been protected long into the future? He doesn't say. But in the very next breath, he complains that the British government under Winston Churchill threw an entire opposition party into prison during World War II and let them rot for the duration.
Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. The British government under Winston Churchill threw an entire opposition party into prison and let them rot for the duration, in some cases with their families. So in a war for democracy, you can do anything.
You should not be surprised to know that Tucker is here referring to Oswald Mosley and the British Union of Fascists. Mosley was an avowed admirer of Hitler, meeting with the Führer on multiple occasions. He and his black shirts roamed the streets of London hunting for Jews in the lead up to World War II, and Mosley pleaded for a negotiated peace with the Nazis after the fall of France. These are the banned and repressed opposition figures that Tucker wants you to cry for. It might give you some kind of insight into the kinds of opposition figures Tucker wants you to sympathise with in Ukraine. The opposition parties and the activists allegedly repressed by the tyrannical Zelensky regime.
Imagine what a man might do who has fewer principles. If that man, say, ran Ukraine, he might seize churches, arrest priests, ban all criticism of himself, disappear his political opponents. And that's happening.
The opposition parties currently prescribed under martial law in Ukraine include one whose former head called for Russia to use nuclear warheads on Ukraine as part of its invasion. Oh, the innocence, the horror. Tucker somehow neglects to mention this small fact to his viewers. Or take, for example, the peace-loving priests of the Kremlin-affiliated Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchate. It's hard to tell why the Ukrainian government may have concerns about the spiritual legitimacy of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, considering Kirill, the head of the Orthodox Church in Russia, and a KGB agent under communism, routinely blesses the Russian invasion of Ukraine, encouraging Russian troops to slaughter Ukrainians so as to automatically go to heaven. These are the words of an ISIS fanatic, not a lover of Jesus Christ. So of course, the Ukrainian government has scrutinized these Kremlin-affiliated priests, these ISIS fanatics. But the grim irony here is that in any case, it is the Russians themselves who have inflicted the gravest damage to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Russian forces have shelled Ukrainian Orthodox Church buildings in eastern Ukraine, and studies show that the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 prompted some 80% of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church's flock to abandon the church in favour of the already existing independent Orthodox Church of Ukraine. Again, Tucker neglects these inconvenient facts. Bartholomew I, the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople and the leader of Orthodox Christians worldwide, granted autocephaly, or self-governorship, to the Orthodox Church of Ukraine 5 years ago, leading to the Great Moscow-Constantinople Schism of 2018, which continues to this day. I know this because I'm an Orthodox Christian, and I support Ukraine with the full knowledge that Ukraine protects religious freedom. Tucker will never explain any of this to his viewers. He prefers instead to simply accuse Zelensky of persecuting all Christians in Ukraine, a venomous slur rendered particularly poisonous by the fact that Zelensky is the Jewish descendant of Holocaust survivors. So Tucker is outraged by the fake persecution of KGB priests and nuclear Holocaust advocates in Ukraine. To recall the immortal words of Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, the horror, the horror. But even this horror pales in comparison for Tucker compared to the nightmarish persecution of another poor innocent lamb by the name of Gonzalo Lira. Tucker's enraged by the persecution of sleazebag American Chilean red pill dating coach Gonzalo Lira at the hands of the Kiev regime.
Just last month, Zelensky threw a man called Gonzalo Lira into prison indefinitely for the crime of daring to write about the Ukrainian government in unflattering ways. He remains in prison tonight.
Tucker Carlson is nowhere to be seen when ex-Wagner commanders testified to executing screaming, crying 5-year-old Ukrainian children with shots to the head.
Она визжит, она маленький ребенок, понимаешь, ей 6 там год, я не знаю, 5 лет. А я выстрелил, ты понимаешь, контрольный. Ты понимаешь, я никого не должен был выпустить.
He's asleep, but he will personally see to it that Zelensky pays should the Kiev regime dare to so much as touch a single blade of Gonzalo Lira's disheveled hair. Russian propagandists have been claiming for over a year now that Zelensky himself personally beheaded the former red pill dating coach and drank his blood in a satanic Zumba class ritual. Right now he appears to still be alive in Ukrainian custody. This may come as a surprise to some people here, but when a country gets invaded, it typically doesn't look kindly upon foreigners who base themselves in said country, while cheering on invading forces and defending their use of rape and torture. But what about free speech, I hear you cry? Of course, everybody should be free to screech fire in a crowded theatre at the top of their lungs. Gonzalo Lira pumped out Russian disinformation and lies on an industrial scale, denying the reality of the Bucha massacre, claiming the Ukrainians slaughtered their own people. In his fevered imagination, the entire massacre was a hoax with fake corpses. Other days he claimed the massacre was really the work of the British MI6. And if this wasn't enough to be arrested, Lira liked to post graphic photos gloating over Ukrainian military casualties, sharing photographs of headless Ukrainian corpses. Lira even celebrated Russian executions of Ukrainian POWs in Mariupol. How could this man have possibly been arrested? Tucker claimed his crime was simply writing unflattering things about the Ukrainian government. Maybe he didn't get the memo on the headless Ukrainian soldiers stuff. No country on earth would accept an enemy propagandist cheering on invasion from within their own borders. Lira himself tells us, I would never dare insult the Ukrainians as a guest in their country. It's wrong to talk about the politics of a country when you are a guest in that country.
I don't go to your house and tell you how to, fix the furniture in your house. No, that's your business. And if you invite me to your home, I am thankful to you, but I will never say a word about what I think of your furniture or decor, because that is your business, not mine. And that's how I've always felt insofar as politics, whenever I live in a city, in a country rather, that I'm not a citizen of. Because it's just wrong. It's wrong to talk about the politics of a country where you are a guest in that country.
There's no reason to defend Lira's heartless propaganda unless you actively want to make it harder for a country being invaded to defend itself. But maybe this is what Tucker wants, to help Russia bomb Ukraine better, kill more Ukrainians, slaughter more innocents. How long would a Ukraine supporter last in Moscow while cheering on the Ukrainian counteroffensive online? 5 seconds. Just a few months ago, Russian authorities detained a young 12-year-old girl's father and moved her into an orphanage because she dared to make drawings at school criticizing the war. I don't remember the Tucker Carlson outrage at that. Perhaps he simply doesn't care about her plight because her story doesn't fit into his narrative about an evil Ukraine propped up by a decadent, dying West. Perhaps Tucker Carlson only sees fit to defend Gonzalo Lira because he supports Gonzalo Lira's atrocious atrocity denialism and his overall support for Russia's war of conquest and aggression in Ukraine. And perhaps he sees a bit of himself in Gonzalo Lira as a fellow traveller on the far right. Tucker knows there are still some lines he can't cross, although he's certainly pushing right up close to them these days, with descriptions of the Jewish president of Ukraine as a sweaty, rat-like persecutor of Christians. His words. But by supporting Gonzalo Lira, a man who describes vaccinated women as sterile, useless cum dumpsters, a man who pushes right up to the limit of endorsing rape while telling other men to treat women like dogs.
Women are like dogs. They are exactly like dogs. And never forget that. You have to treat them like you would treat a dog. Firmly.
Every woman I've ever been with responds extraordinarily well to a almost violent physical encounter. I am not saying rape. I am not saying violence that leaves any kind of permanent injury or a mark or something.
A man who enjoys resharing 4chan poll posts about international Jewish conspiracy. Tucker makes his allegiances clear. He's using not so much a dog whistle as a loudhailer these days. He ends his rant about Gonzalo Lira by promising that Biden and the Democrats are looking forward to imprisoning and executing their political opponents in America, just like Zelensky. A fitting way to conclude this unhinged, paranoid monologue.
So in a peaceful democracy, you have to debate your political opponents in public, and that's tiresome. But in a war for democracy, you can just throw them in jail or have them executed. You can see that many in Washington are looking forward to that moment.
Ultimately, Tucker doesn't care about Ukraine and its democracy. He doesn't care about all the untold hundreds of thousands of lives lost in this brutal and unnecessary war. For him, it's a parlor game, just an extension of the US culture wars. Ukrainians must die so that a right-wing dictatorship can stick it to the decadent liberal West. We know why Tucker and the American far right have taken this line. Their entire ideology is predicated on the idea that decadent Western progressives have destroyed the West with homosexuality, transgenderism, egalitarianism. They need to see the West and progressive values defeated on the world stage by a visibly authoritarian, repressive alternative that promotes hierarchy, patriarchy, obedience to the state. This is the same mindset as the doomed Vichy French collaborationists during World War II. Unable to impose authoritarianism and reaction at home by force, they wait for their ideological allies to strike the blow from abroad. It's looking increasingly likely that this blow will not come from Putin's Russia, weak, decaying, corrupt as it is. Some will therefore shift their hopes to Xi Jinping and China. Others will likely continue their endless circumambulations in this parched desert they have made for themselves, hopelessly deluding themselves that Russia will win, lashing out furiously at their perceived enemies as this prospect further recedes away into the distance. The most debauched among them will turn to lone wolf terror attacks and other spasms of pointless nihilistic brutality and violence, as it becomes clear they will never live to inherit the world of their fascist nightmares. There will be much weeping and gnashing of teeth as we witness the long drawn-out death rattles of this vicious political tendency. They will lose, but it will be painful, and madmen like Tucker will continue howling into the wind for a long while yet.